The Portella della Ginestra massacre was one of the more violent acts in the history of modern Italian politics, when 11 people were killed and 27 wounded during May Day celebrations in Sicily on May 1, 1947, in the municipality of Piana degli Albanesi. Those held responsible were the bandit and separatist leader Salvatore Giuliano and his band, although their motives and intentions are still a matter of controversy. Preceding events. From May 1893, during the period of the Fassa Siciliani, the peasants of the neighboring towns of Piana degli Albanesi, San Giuseppe Gatto and San Cipriello used to gather at Portella della Ginestra for the Labor Day celebrations at the initiative of the physician and peasant leader Nicola Barbato, who used to speak to the crowd from a big rock that was later called Barbato's Stone. The tradition was interrupted during the fascist period and resumed after the fall of the fascist regime. The massacre took place 12 days after a surprise victory by the People's Bloc, a coalition of the Italian Communist Party and the Italian Socialist Party, in the elections for the Constituent Assembly of the Autonomous Region of Sicily on April 2021. 1947. The People's Bloc obtained 29.13% of the vote, while the Christian Democrat Party got 20.52% and the Qualunquist and Monarchist came third and fourth, with national elections set for October 1947. The leftist win in Sicily created speculation that a coalition led by Palmiro Togliatti might bring Italy under communist rule. In Sicily, the communist leader on Sicily, Girolamo Corsi, pledged to redistribute large land holdings, but to preserve any of 100 hectares or less. The massacre. On May 1, 1947, hundreds of mostly poor peasants gathered at Portella della Ginestra, 3 kilometers from the town of Piana degli Albanesi on the way to San Giuseppe Gatto for the traditional International Labor Day parade. At 10:15, the Communist Party secretary from Piana degli Albanesi began to address the crowd when gunfire broke out. It was later determined that machine guns had been fired from the surrounding hills, as well as by men on horseback. 11 people were killed, including 4 children: Serafino Lascari, Giovanni Grifo, Giuseppe Di Maggio and Vincenzo La Fata, both 7 years old. 33 people were wounded, including a little girl who had her jaw shot off. The attack was attributed to the bandit and separatist leader Salvatore Giuliano. His aim had been to punish local leftists for the recent election results. In an open letter he took sole responsibility for the murders and claimed that he had only wanted his men to fire above the heads of the crowd. The deaths had been a mistake. Until the massacre, Giuliano had been regarded by many as a modern-day Robin Hood who stole from wealthy Sicilians to help the impoverished Sicilians. The shooting of children and peasants at Ginestra, however, outraged his former admirers, and a bounty of 3 million lire was offered by the Italian government for Giuliano's capture. The massacre created a national scandal. The communist-controlled Italian General Confederation of Labour called a general strike in protest against the massacre. According to newspaper reports, hints at the possibility of civil war were heard as communist leaders harangued meetings of 6 million workers who struck throughout Italy in protest against the May Day massacre in Sicily. The Minister of the Interior, the Christian Democrat Mario Selba, reported to Parliament the next day that so far as the police could determine, the Portella della Ginestra shooting was non-political. Bandits notoriously infested the valley in which it occurred, said Selba. Corsi disagreed and charged that the mafia had perpetrated the attack, in cahoots with the large landowners, monarchists and the rightist Uomo Qualunque Front. The debate ended in a fistfight between the left and the right. Nearly 200 deputies took part in the brawl. Denouncing the massacre, Lee Causey and Selber would be the main opponents in the aftermath of the massacre and the successive killing of the suspected perpetrator Giuliano, and the trial against Giuliano's lieutenant Gaspare Picciotto and other remaining members of Giuliano's gang. While Selber dismissed any political motive, Lee Causey stressed the political nature of the massacre, and tried to uncover the truth. Lee Causey claimed that the police inspector Ettore Messana, supposed to coordinate the persecution of the bandits, had been in league with Giuliano, and denounced Selber for allowing Messana to remain in office. Later documents would prove the accusation. Lee Causey suspected a campaign against the left and linked it with the crisis in the national government, which would lead to the expulsion of the communists and socialists from government, as well as to prevent the left from entering the regional government. On May 30, 1947, Giuseppe Alessi became the first president of the Sicilian region with the support of the centre-right, and the same day the Gasperi announced his new centrist government, who had been in the National Union governments since 1945, challenging Giuliano. Speaking at Portella della Ginestra on the second anniversary of the massacre, Lee Causey publicly called on Giuliano to name names. He received a written reply from the bandit leader: "It is only men with no shame who gives out names. Not a man who tends to take justice into his own hands, who aims to keep his reputation in society high, and who values this aim more than his own life." Lee Causey responded by reminding Giuliano that he would almost certainly be betrayed. "Don't you understand that Selber will have you killed?" Giuliano again replied, hinting at the powerful secrets that he possessed. "I know that Selber wants to have me killed. He wants to have me killed because I keep a nightmare hanging over him. I can make sure he is brought to account for actions that, if revealed, would destroy his political career and end his life." Salvatore Giuliano was killed on July 5, 1950. When the hearings for the trial against Giuliano's captured associate started in Viterbo, near Rome, he always denied that there had been anyone behind him who had ordered the killing. However, his lieutenant Picciotto and other witnesses claimed that a few days before the massacre, on April 27, 1947, Giuliano had received a letter, which he destroyed immediately after reading it. He told his band, "Boys, the hour of our liberation is at hand." According to the witnesses, the letter demanded the massacre at Portella della Ginestra in exchange for liberty for all of the band. Viterbo trial. The trial against the perpetrators for the massacre started in the summer of 1950 in Viterbo. Selber was again said to have been involved in the plot to carry out the massacre, but the accusations were often contradictory or vague. In the end, the judge concluded that no higher authority had ordered the massacre, and that the Giuliano band had acted autonomously. At the Viterbo trial, Picciotto said, "Again and again Selber has gone back on his word. Mattarella and Casumino returned to Rome to plead for total amnesty for us, but Selber denied all his promises." Picciotto also claimed that he had killed the bandit Salvatore Giuliano in his sleep by arrangement with Selber. However, there was no evidence that Selber had had any relationship with Picciotto. At the trial for the Portella della Ginestra massacre, Gaspare Picciotto said, "Those who have made promises to us are called Bernardo Mattarella, Prince Alliator, the monarchist MP Marchesano, and also Signor Selber, Minister for Home Affairs." It was Marchesano, Prince Alliator and Bernardo Mattarella who ordered the massacre of Portella della Ginestra. Before the massacre they met Giuliano. However, the MPs Mattarella, Alliator and Marchesano were declared innocent by the Court of Appeal of Palermo, at a trial which dealt with their alleged role in the event. Witnesses disappear. Picciotto was sentenced to life in imprisonment and forced labor. Most of the other 70 bandits met the same fate. Others were at large, but one by one they all disappeared. Picciotto probably was the only one who could reveal the truth behind the massacre. While he was in Giuliano's band, he carried a pass signed by a colonel of the Carabinieri that allowed him to move freely about the island. At the trial he declared, "We are one body. Bandits, police and mafia, like the Father, the Son and the Holy Spirit." While serving his sentence, he wrote his autobiography awaiting a new trial at which he would be charged with killing Giuliano. Some authorities were beginning to take his evidence more serious, and perjury and other charges were made against police and Carabinieri. Picciotto realized that he had been abandoned and was threatening to reveal much more than at the first trial. In particular, who signed the letter which had been brought to Giuliano just before the attack. On February 9, 1954, he took a cup of coffee with what he thought was a tuberculosis medicine. Instead, someone had replaced it with strychnine. Within an hour he was dead, and his autobiography disappeared. The massacre created a national scandal, which ended in 1956 with the conviction of the remaining members of Giuliano's band. It still remains a highly controversial topic. The finger of blame has been pointed at numerous sources, including the Italian government. Leftists who were the victims of the attack have blamed the landed barons and the mafia. Significantly, the memorial plaque erected by them makes no mention of Giuliano or his band. On May 1, 1947, while celebrating the Working Class Festival and the victory of April 20, men, women and children of Piana, Ciparello and S. Giuseppe fell under the bullets of the mafia and the landed barons to crush the struggle of the peasants against feudalism. Portella della Ginestra massacre memorial plaque. Conspiracy theories. While some historians see the massacre as a conspiracy of the mafia, anti-communist political forces, the Christian Democratic Party in particular, and American intelligence services in the wake of the Cold War, others consider the bloodbath as the culmination of local struggles for land rights and land reform in the area of Piana degli Albanese and San Giuseppe Gatto. Just as at the end of World War I, the post-war period saw an increase of violence between landowners backed by the mafia and left-wing peasant movements. A few weeks before the massacre, the local mafia boss of Piana, Francesco Cucciar, and others had asked landowners for money to put an end to the communists once and for all. They made clear that they were ready to go beyond the traditional acts of mafia violence that had been used against the socialist peasant movement before the rise of fascism in the early 1920s, when 6 socialist militants had been killed in Piana, without the consent of the mafia in Piana degli Albanese, San Giuseppe Gatto and San Ciparello. Giuliano could not have shot at Portella della Ginestra, according to the historian Francesco Renda. Renda, among others, was an eyewitness of the massacre. That May morning he was supposed to speak at Portella, but I got a bit late and before my eyes this horrific tragedy happened. Renda recalls that immediately after the massacre, the peasants of Piana wanted their own justice, threatening to kill the mafiosi of their county. I convinced them, Renda remembered, that would have been the provocation needed to outlaw the communists. Film depictions. Salvatore Giuliano is a 1962 Italian film directed by Francesco Rossi. Shot in a neo-realist documentary, non-linear style, it follows the lives of those involved with Giuliano. When Rossi came to Sicily in 1961 to reenact the Portella della Ginestra sequence massacre for the film, the trauma from 14 years earlier was still fresh. He asked 1,000 peasants to go back and enact exactly what they, the friends and relatives, had been through. Events nearly slipped out of control. When the gunfire sound effects started, the crowd panicked and knocked over one of the cameras in rush to escape. Women wept and knelt in prayer. Men threw themselves to the ground in agony. One old woman, dressed entirely in black, planted herself before the camera and repeated in an anguished wail, "Where are my children?" 2 of her sons had died at the hands of Giuliano and his band. Michael Cimino's 1987 version, a film adaptation of Mario Puzo's The Sicilian, was filmed instead at Sutera and Caltanissetta. The massacre was also depicted in 2009 in Giuseppe Tornatore's film Baria, La Porta del Vento.